Snow fell hard in western Montana, thick flakes driven sideways by a wind that cut straight through wool coats and pride alike. Lucas Reed stood at the iron gate of the Cole estate, shoulders squared out of habit, the kind drilled into him years ago overseas. It didn't help here, not against money, not against blood that had decided it no longer recognized him. Behind the gate, warm lights glowed through tall windows. Inside that house, the heat was steady, the floors polished, the silence expensive. Outside, Lucas's world had been reduced to 2 shivering children and a German shepherd whose muscles were locked tight, every instinct alert. Ethan and Ellie pressed close to him, their small hands numb inside gloves that had seen better winters. A cardboard box slid across the driveway and tipped over, spilling clothes into the snow. Another followed. Then a framed photograph. Lucas, Sarah, the twins at a county fair years ago, hit the ground and cracked. The sound carried louder than it should have. "Enough," Lucas said quietly, though no one was listening. Margaret Cole stood just inside the open gate, her black coat spotless, her posture perfect. Grief had not bent her spine. It had sharpened it. "This is over, Lucas," she said, voice calm, practiced. "You don't live here anymore." Lucas took one step forward. Rex moved with him, a low growl rolling from the dog's chest. Not wild, not reckless, controlled, protective. The security guards flinched despite themselves. "My wife was buried 3 weeks ago," Lucas said. "The kids haven't even—" "You're not stable," Margaret cut in. "Time 400 maunums. You have no income worth mentioning, no permanent residence, and I won't have my grandchildren raised by a man who refuses help." Lucas almost laughed. Help in her world meant control. Lawyers, paperwork, quiet threats wrapped in polite language. Ellie buried her face into his jacket. "Dad, it's cold." Lucas knelt, pulling both kids closer, his voice dropping. "I know. I've got you." Rex stepped forward, planting himself between the family and the guards, his body a living wall. Snow clung to his fur. He did not bark. He didn't need to. "Take your things and go," Margaret said. "You're not taking another step onto this property." Lucas stood slowly. He looked at the house one last time. The place where Sarah had grown up, where she'd once stood on the porch and told him she was pregnant, laughing and crying at the same time. Home, he realized, wasn't brick or iron. It was already standing beside him, shaking in the cold. "You promised Sarah you'd protect them," Lucas said. Margaret didn't hesitate. "I am." "No," Lucas replied, steady now. "You're protecting yourself." The gate buzzed. Metal groaned. Then it swung shut between them with a final, echoing clang that seemed to seal more than property lines. Snow rushed in to fill the silence. Rex turned slightly, checking on the kids before looking back at Lucas. Amber eyes steady, asking the same question he always did. "What's next?" Lucas lifted the broken photograph from the snow and slid it into the box. He guided Ethan and Ellie toward the pickup truck, parked crooked at the edge of the drive. The engine coughed before catching. As he pulled away, the estate lights blurred behind falling snow, shrinking until they disappeared altogether. "Dad?" Ethan's voice was small, careful. "Did we do something wrong?" Lucas stared down the long, empty road, hands tight on the wheel. "No," he said after a beat. "None of this is on you." In the rearview mirror, Rex met his eyes and held them. The wind howled. The storm closed in. And somewhere beneath the weight of humiliation and loss, a quieter truth waited. One that had been planned, protected, and buried for a reason Lucas didn't yet understand. The gate was closed. But the story wasn't over. The iron gate vanished behind them, swallowed by snow and distance. Yet its echo stayed with Lucas Reed as he drove west into the storm. The pickup's heater rattled, pushing out air that was barely warm. The road ahead was empty. No streetlights, no houses, just a ribbon of asphalt cutting through white nothingness. Lucas kept both hands on the wheel, knuckles pale. Years ago, those hands had guided teams through hostile ground. Tonight, they were guiding his children into uncertainty. In the back seat, Ethan and Ellie sat shoulder to shoulder beneath a single blanket. They didn't complain. That hurt more than if they had. Kids should cry when they're scared. Silence meant they were trying to be brave for him. Rex lay stretched across the floor between their feet, his body angled so he could touch both of them. Every few seconds, his eyes lifted to the side mirrors, then back to Lucas. Always checking, always counting exits. Snow struck the windshield hard enough to sound like gravel. "How far are we going?" Ellie finally asked, her voice thin. Lucas swallowed. "Not far. Just somewhere quiet for the night." That wasn't a lie. It just wasn't the whole truth. The fuel gauge hovered just above empty. Lucas had done the math twice already. Enough gas to get them out of town. Not enough for mistakes. Not enough for detours. Ethan leaned forward slightly. "Dad, did Grandma mean what she said?" Lucas didn't answer right away. He watched the road, the storm, the way the darkness seemed to close in tighter with every mile. He'd been trained to assess threats, to read terrain. This wasn't terrain. This was life after the bottom dropped out. "She's angry," Lucas said at last. "And angry people say things they can't take back." "But we're still a family, right?" Ellie asked. Rex lifted his head and nudged her knee gently before Lucas could respond. "Yes," Lucas said, firmer now. "That hasn't changed." The town lights faded behind them. Cell service dropped to nothing. Lucas checked his phone anyway. Habit more than hope. No signal, no missed calls. Just the lock screen photo of Sarah, taken years ago at a county diner, smiling like she'd found something worth keeping. "I'm sorry," he murmured, so quietly the kids couldn't hear. The road narrowed as it followed the Missouri River, dark and swollen beneath sheets of ice. Lucas slowed, squinting through the snowfall. His chest felt tight. Not panic, not yet, but the familiar pressure of responsibility closing in. A flicker of memory surfaced. Sarah in the passenger seat once, laughing as Rex shoved his head between them, convinced he was part of every conversation. She'd rested her hand on Lucas's arm and said, "No matter what happens, promise me one thing. Keep them together." Lucas exhaled slowly. "I will," he said now, out loud. Rex's ears twitched. The pickup crested a low rise, and something familiar appeared through the snow. An outline of rusted corrugated metal, half hidden by trees. Lucas eased off the gas. The old river dock. The maintenance warehouse he'd worked at between contracts. Forgotten by most people. Ignored by everyone with better options. He pulled onto the gravel access road. The tires crunched loudly in the quiet. Ethan pressed his face to the window. "What is this place?" "Just an old building," Lucas said. "Nothing fancy." The warehouse loomed closer, dark and weather-beaten. One window glowed faintly, moonlight reflecting off broken glass. Lucas parked near the side entrance and cut the engine. The sudden silence was heavy. No one moved. The wind rattled loose metal. Somewhere nearby, water shifted beneath ice. Lucas turned in his seat. "Okay, we're going to go inside, warm up and rest. That's the plan." Ellie nodded, though her eyes darted toward the shadows. Rex rose first, jumping down and circling the truck, nose low, alert but calm. After a moment, he sat and looked back at Lucas. Clear. For now. Lucas opened his door, cold air rushing in. He stepped out, boots sinking into snow, and helped the kids down. As they walked toward the building, Lucas felt the full weight of it hit him. Not just the cold, not just the fear. He had no house, no money to speak of, no safety net. Just 2 children counting on him, and a dog who refused to let him fall alone. The warehouse door groaned open, releasing a breath of stale air and old oil. Rex stepped inside first, and for the first time that night, Lucas felt something shift. Not hope, not yet, but the quiet certainty that this place, broken as it was, would matter. "Come on," Lucas said softly. "We're here. We're here." The words echoed hollowly as the warehouse door creaked shut behind them. The sound lingered, bouncing off rusted beams and concrete walls that smelled of old oil, damp wood, and a past no one bothered to remember anymore. Cold lived in this place. It crawled up from the floor and settled into bones. Lucas set the box of salvaged belongings down near the far wall and shrugged off his coat to wrap it around Ellie's shoulders. She accepted it without a word, her teeth chattering despite her effort to hide it. Ethan stood nearby, hands buried deep in his pockets, scanning the space like a small man forced to grow up too fast. The warehouse lights didn't work. Lucas wasn't surprised. He pulled a flashlight from the truck and clicked it on. The beam cut through dust and shadows, revealing stacked pallets, an old workbench, coils of rope stiff with age. This place had once mattered. To dock workers, to shipping crews, to men who clocked in before sunrise and went home sore but proud. Now, it was just another forgotten corner. "It smells weird," Ellie whispered. Lucas nodded. "I know," But it's dry, and the roof still holds. He didn't add, for now. Rex moved ahead of them, nails clicking softly on concrete. His posture was different here, not tense like at the gate. Focused, purposeful. He paused every few steps, sniffing the air, then the floor, then the walls, not searching for comfort, searching for answers. Lucas noticed, but said nothing. He found a corner shielded from the worst drafts and dragged over an old tarp. Using muscle memory, he worked, quickly, clearing debris, stacking pallets, creating a makeshift barrier against the cold. It felt good to move with intention again. Familiar. Almost normal. Ellie sat down hard, exhaustion finally winning. "Dad," her voice cracked. "Mom wouldn't want us here." The sentence landed heavy. Lucas froze, crouched by the heater he'd brought from the truck. For a second, he couldn't breathe. He saw Sarah's face the way it had looked in the hospital. Tired, brave, still trying to smile for the kids. He crossed the space and knelt in front of Ellie, resting his hands on her small shoulders. "Your mom would want us together," he said carefully. "She'd want us safe. That's what matters." Ellie nodded, but tears slid down anyway. Ethan turned his face away, jaw tight. Rex came back then, pressing his body against Ellie's side, warm and solid. She leaned into him instinctively, burying her fingers in his fur. His presence didn't fix anything, but it slowed the breaking. Lucas stood and finished setting up the heater. It hummed to life, weak but determined, casting a dull orange glow across the walls. Shadows stretched and shifted like ghosts. "That's better," Lucas said, forcing a small smile. "Luxury accommodations." Ethan snorted despite himself. For a few minutes, there was only the sound of wind rattling the metal siding and the steady hum of the heater. Lucas thought maybe, just maybe, they could get through the night quietly. Then Rex stopped. He stood near the center of the warehouse, nose pressed to the floorboards that covered part of the concrete. He sniffed once, then again. His tail went still. "Rex," Lucas said, "time for hums." "What is it?" The dog didn't look back. He pawed at the wood, claws scraping lightly. A low sound slipped from his throat. Not a growl. Something closer to concern. Lucas frowned. Rex didn't do this. Not without reason. "Probably mice," Lucas muttered, more to himself than anyone else. He turned back toward the kids. "Hey, let's get you." Rex barked once. Sharp, controlled. It cut through the warehouse like a snapped wire. Ellie flinched. Ethan stood. "Dad, he's not scared." Lucas slowly approached, flashlight sweeping the floor. Rex stepped aside just enough to let him see the warped board beneath his paw. The wood was darker there, older, stressed. Lucas pressed down lightly with his boot. The board dipped. He straightened, heart thudding once. Hard. "Okay," he said quietly. "Back up, boy." Rex didn't move. He just looked at Lucas, eyes steady, unblinking, like he was holding on to something important and wasn't about to let go. Lucas felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cold. He backed away instead, drawing the kids closer. "We'll check it in the morning," he said. "Everyone's tired." Rex hesitated, then obeyed, reluctantly, settling beside Ellie again. But his gaze never left that spot on the floor. Not once. Lucas lay back against the wall later, eyes open, listening to the warehouse breathe. He told himself this was just another shelter, just another rough night. But deep down, he knew better, because Rex had found something, and whatever lay beneath those boards had been waiting a long time to be seen. Lucas didn't sleep. The warehouse settled around them in slow, aching noises, metal contracting in the cold, wind dragging itself along the walls like fingers searching for a way in. Every time Lucas closed his eyes, the image of Rex standing rigid over that warped floorboard pushed its way back into his mind. Rex never reacted without reason. Lucas lay on his back, staring up into the darkness, counting the shallow breaths of his children. Ellie's small hand rested on Rex's shoulder, her fingers twitching now and then, as if even in sleep she needed to know he was still there. Ethan lay curled on his side, jaw clenched, trying too hard to be strong. The guilt hit Lucas then, sharp and sudden. This wasn't the life Sarah had imagined for them. The thought pulled him backward, past the warehouse, past the storm, back to a quieter night years ago. Sarah had been sitting at their kitchen table, Rex sprawled at her feet, tail thumping every time Lucas walked by. She'd looked up from her coffee and said it casually, like she was talking about the weather. "If something ever happens to me," she'd said, "don't ignore him." Lucas had frowned. "Ignore who?" "Rex," she'd replied, nodding toward the dog. "He sees things before people do. He always has." Lucas had laughed then, leaning down to scratch Rex behind the ears. "You hear that, buddy? You're psychic now." Sarah hadn't smiled. Not fully. She'd reached across the table and taken Lucas's hand instead. "Promise me," she'd said softly. Lucas swallowed now, the memory pressing on his chest like a weight. He'd promised. He just hadn't known what that promise would cost. A soft scrape cut through the silence. Lucas's eyes snapped open. Rex was on his feet, body low, ears forward, staring at the same spot on the floor as before. He didn't bark. He didn't growl. He simply waited. Muscles coiled, breath steady. Lucas sat up slowly, careful not to wake the kids. He reached for his flashlight, clicked it on, and let the beam settle on Rex. "Easy," Lucas whispered. "I see it." Rex didn't move. Lucas stood and crossed the warehouse, every step deliberate. He crouched beside the warped board, running his fingers along the edge. The wood was colder here, older. It flexed under light pressure. This wasn't random damage. "Whatever you found," Lucas murmured, "it's not going anywhere tonight." Rex finally looked at him then. Not defiant, not anxious, just intent, like a soldier holding a position until relieved. Lucas sighed and straightened. He wasn't ready. Not tonight. He needed daylight, tools, a clear head. He turned away, forcing himself to trust his own instincts for once, instead of following Rex blindly. As he did, his boot brushed against something half buried beneath a pile of old tarps near the wall. A photograph slid out. Lucas froze. He bent down and picked it up carefully, brushing dust from the cracked surface. It was an old photo, edges yellowed with time. Sarah stood in the center, younger, laughing, one arm around Lucas, the other resting on Rex's head. The twins were barely toddlers, clinging to her legs. Lucas's throat tightened. He didn't remember packing that photo. He didn't remember bringing it here. "Sarah," he whispered. Behind him, Rex exhaled softly, a sound almost like relief. Lucas stared at the photo, heart pounding. This wasn't coincidence. Too many things weren't lining up anymore. The timing, the warehouse, Rex's behavior, the words Sarah had chosen all those years ago. He looked back at the floorboard. Whatever was beneath it wasn't just wood and rot. It was memory. It was intention. Lucas returned to his spot against the wall, photo clutched in his hand. He slid it carefully into his jacket pocket, right over his heart. He sat there until the heater flickered and the storm outside softened into a steady fall of snow. Rex eventually lay back down beside Ellie, but his eyes never closed. Neither did Lucas's. Because for the first time since the iron gate had slammed shut, Lucas understood something with quiet certainty. Sarah hadn't just left him love. She'd left him a trail, and Rex was following it. What part of this story pulls at you the most right now? Option 1, the children. Option 2, the loyal dog. Option 3, the hidden truth. Comment 1, 2, or 3 below and tell us why. Morning didn't arrive the way it used to in Lucas Reed's old life. There was no gentle light through curtains, no coffee smell, no radio murmuring local news. Dawn crept into the warehouse like a trespasser, pale, uncertain, slipping through cracked windows and settling on cold concrete. Lucas was already awake. He stood near the side door, moogless hands wrapped around nothing, watching snow drift sideways outside. Rex sat beside him, alert, head slightly tilted, as if listening to a frequency only he could hear. The kids slept a few yards behind them, curled close together for warmth. Something felt wrong. Not danger yet, but the quiet before it. Lucas stepped outside, boots crunching softly. The air was sharp, clean, unforgiving. He scanned the riverbank, the tree line, the access road. At first, there was nothing. Just snow, water moving slow under ice, the distant groan of wind. Then he saw it. Tire tracks, fresh, too clean to belong to delivery trucks that hadn't used this dock in years. Lucas crouched, brushing snow aside with his glove. The tread was deep, wide. Not a local beater, something heavier, an SUV. His jaw tightened. Rex moved forward, nose low, following the trail until it vanished near the bend in the road. The fur along his spine rose just slightly, not aggression, but awareness. Yeah, Lucas murmured. I see it too. Behind him, the warehouse door creaked open. Ethan stepped out, rubbing his eyes. Dad? Lucas straightened instantly. Go back inside. Ethan hesitated. What's wrong? Nothing, Lucas said, too quickly. He softened his voice. Just cold. Ethan nodded, though his eyes lingered on Rex, then the tracks. Kids noticed more than adults liked to admit. Back inside, Lucas lit the heater again and handed the kids protein bars from the glove compartment. It wasn't much, but it was something. Ellie managed a small smile. Are we staying here? She asked. For now, Lucas said. Just for today. His phone buzzed in his pocket. No signal bar appeared. But the call came through anyway, distorted and delayed. That alone made his stomach drop. He stepped away and answered. Lucas Reed. Margaret Cole's voice slid through the static, calm as ever. Good morning. Lucas closed his eyes briefly. How did you get this number to work? Connections, she replied. You should know how that works by now. He didn't respond. I spoke to my attorney last night, Margaret continued. He's concerned about the children. Your living situation is unstable. Lucas glanced toward Ethan and Ellie, sitting cross-legged beside Rex. They're fed, they're warm, they're with their father. For now, Margaret said, a welfare check has been requested. Nothing dramatic, just procedure. Lucas felt the warehouse tilt slightly, like the deck of a ship in rough water. Time seen 100 pounds. You did this? I'm protecting them, Margaret replied. You're not thinking clearly, Lucas. Grief does that to people. So does trauma. Lucas laughed then. Once sharp, humorless. You don't know anything about what I'm thinking. I know this, she said. Courts don't favor uncertainty, and dogs, especially trained ones, can complicate things. Lucas looked at Rex. Rex met his gaze. Steady. If anyone comes near my kids, Lucas said quietly, you'll regret it. Margaret paused. Just a fraction too long. I hope you make the right choice, she said at last. The line went dead. Lucas slipped the phone back into his pocket, breathing slow, controlled. He'd been hunted before. He recognized the pattern now. The pressure, the surveillance, the legal framing meant to make him look unfit. This wasn't family conflict anymore. This was escalation. Outside, an engine sounded briefly in the distance, then faded. Rex moved to the door, standing directly in front of it, body squared, eyes fixed on the road beyond the walls. Ellie noticed. Rex doesn't like it, she whispered. No, Lucas said. He doesn't. Lucas knelt in front of the kids, lowering his voice. Listen to me. If anyone comes here, you stay with Rex. You don't answer questions unless I'm standing right next to you. Understand? They nodded. Lucas stood, shoulders settling into a familiar posture, calm, ready. Because somewhere beyond the snow and silence, people were watching. And Lucas Reed understood the truth now, clearer than the cold air in his lungs. This wasn't about money. It wasn't about grief. It was about control. And the hunt had already begun. The storm came back hard that afternoon, rolling in off the river like it had unfinished business. Wind slammed against the warehouse walls, rattling the loose panels and turning the heater's weak hum into a losing battle. Lucas tightened the straps on his jacket and checked the door again. Still locked. Still quiet. Too quiet. Rex hadn't moved from the center of the floor since morning. He stood over the same warped boards, posture fixed, eyes tracking something Lucas couldn't see. Not pacing, not anxious, holding ground. It was the stance Lucas remembered from long nights on watch, when the threat wasn't visible yet, but it was coming. "Okay," Lucas said under his breath. "We're doing this." He sent the kids to the far corner with blankets and told them to stay put. Ellie protested once, then stopped when she saw his face. Ethan nodded without a word, older than his years again. Lucas grabbed a pry bar from the old workbench and crouched beside Rex. "Back," he said gently. Rex didn't. Lucas met his eyes. There was no fear there, no confusion, just certainty. "All right," Lucas whispered. "Together." He wedged the pry bar under the edge of the warped plank and leaned his weight into it. The wood groaned, protesting. Another push, and a crack split the air, sharp and final. The board gave way beneath him, collapsing inward with a burst of dust and splinters. Ellie screamed. Lucas staggered back as the floor caved in, revealing a dark cavity beneath the warehouse. Cold air rushed upward, carrying the smell of damp earth and metal. Rex lunged forward, stopping inches from the edge, muscles rigid, barking once. Loud, commanding, not panicked. "Easy," Lucas snapped, grabbing his collar. The dust settled slowly. Lucas shined the flashlight into the hole, heart pounding. The beam cut through debris and shadows, then caught on something that didn't belong. Steel. A rectangular object sat wedged beneath the broken boards, half buried, matte black, reinforced corners scarred with age. Lucas's breath caught. He recognized it instantly. Military-grade lockbox. The same kind used overseas to secure sensitive equipment. The same locking mechanism. The same weight. You didn't find boxes like that by accident. Rex lowered himself to the floor beside the opening, head tilted, watching Lucas. Not the box. Lucas dropped to one knee and reached down carefully, bracing himself as he pulled. The box was heavier than it looked. He strained, teeth clenched, and dragged it free, setting it on the concrete with a dull thud. For a moment, no one spoke. The kids edged closer, wide-eyed. "What is it?" Ethan asked. Lucas wiped dust from the top with his sleeve. His fingers froze. Carved into the steel, worn but unmistakable, was a single name. Sarah. Ellie sucked in a breath. "Mom?" Lucas couldn't answer. His throat had closed completely. He stared at the box, mind racing. Sarah hated clutter, hated secrets, or so he thought. Yet here it was, hidden beneath a place no one would look, protected by steel and time, protected by Rex. "Dad," Ellie whispered, "did Mom put that there?" Lucas swallowed hard. "I don't know." But he did. Rex sat back on his haunches, watching Lucas with an intensity that bordered on relief, like a job finally done. Lucas's hands trembled as he reached for the latches. They were cold under his fingers. He paused, suddenly aware of how much was about to change. Some doors, once opened, couldn't be closed again. He looked at his children. "Whatever's in here," he said slowly, "we take it one step at a time." They nodded. Lucas released the first latch, then the second. The sound was soft, almost polite. The lid lifted. Inside lay a neat stack, a sealed envelope addressed in Sarah's handwriting, a USB drive in a padded sleeve, and a bundle of legal documents bound with twine. The kind of paperwork Lucas had learned to respect. Estate planning, trusts, family law filings. Things that didn't shout danger, but changed lives all the same. Lucas picked up the envelope last. Rex leaned closer, pressing his shoulder against Lucas's leg, grounding him. Lucas traced Sarah's name with his thumb. The letters were careful, deliberate, written by someone who knew exactly why she was doing this. "Why didn't you tell me?" he whispered. The wind howled outside, rattling the warehouse again, as if the storm itself wanted an answer. Lucas stood slowly, the envelope heavy in his hand, and felt the truth settle into him with chilling clarity. This wasn't a coincidence. This wasn't luck. This was preparation. And whatever Sarah had buried here wasn't meant to save him from the storm. It was meant to prepare him for what came next. Rex lifted his head and looked toward the door, ears snapping forward. The hunt was getting closer, and the floor had just given way to something powerful enough to change everything. Lucas sat on the cold concrete with the lockbox between his boots, the storm pacing the walls like it wanted inside. He didn't rush. He had learned the hard way that some moments demanded stillness. Rex stayed pressed against his knee, steady as an anchor, while the kids hovered close enough to hear but far enough to breathe. Lucas broke the seal. The paper slid free with a dry whisper. Sarah's handwriting filled the page. Calm, careful, unmistakably hers. For a second, he just stared, letting the familiar slant of her letters bring her back into the room. "Lucas, if you're reading this, then my mother has already begun what she always said she'd never do." His chest tightened. "I didn't hide this from you because I didn't trust you. I hid it because I knew you would try to shield me from it. And this time I needed to shield you." Ellie edged closer, eyes fixed on the page. Ethan leaned in, jaw set. "There are things in this family that don't belong to love. Control. Silence. Power dressed up as protection. I learned early how to survive it. You taught me how to walk away." Lucas swallowed hard and kept reading. "If they push you out, if they threaten custody, if they say you are unfit, then the protections activate. Do not argue. Do not bargain. Call Daniel Brooks. Give him the USB, trust the process I put in place. He glanced at the drive in the box, then back to the letter. Most of all, trust Rex. He was trained to follow patterns, to sense danger, to guard what matters. I taught him one last thing, how to find the truth when the ground gives way. Lucas closed his eyes. The floorboard, the timing, the way Rex had held that spot like a promise. "I'm here," Lucas whispered, though he wasn't sure who he was talking to anymore. He read the last lines twice. "The inheritance isn't money. Not really. It's leverage. It's proof. It's a way to make sure no one can erase you or the kids when I'm gone. I love you. I love them. And I believe you'll know when to use this." The paper trembled in his hands. Ellie broke the silence. "Mom knew they'd do this?" Lucas nodded once. "She planned for it." Ethan looked at the lockbox. "Is that why Rex kept scratching the floor?" Rex lifted his head at the sound of his name, amber eyes steady. "Yes," Lucas said. "That's why." The wind slammed the building again, and for the first time, Lucas didn't flinch. The fear was still there, but it had shape now. Direction. He folded the letter carefully and set it back in the box, then picked up the USB and the bundled documents. "Daniel Brooks," Lucas said aloud, testing the name. It felt solid. His phone buzzed in his pocket. No bars, but the vibration cut clean through the noise. A voicemail notification appeared, time-stamped minutes earlier. Lucas stepped aside and played it on speaker. "Lucas, it's Daniel," a calm voice said. "If you're hearing this, it means Sarah's conditions may have been met. I've been expecting your call. Don't stay where you are. Bring everything. Time 700 pms. And Lucas, don't let them isolate you." The message ended. Lucas stared at the screen, then at Rex. The dog's tail thumped once against the concrete. Slow, certain. "All right," Lucas said quietly. "We move." "But where?" Ellie asked. "Somewhere they won't expect," Lucas replied. "And somewhere with witnesses." He packed fast, papers sealed in a weatherproof bag, the lockbox wrapped tight, the kids' coats zipped to their chins. Rex stayed close, never once blocking the exit, never once looking back at the hole in the floor. That job was done. As Lucas slid into the driver's seat, the warehouse lights flickered and died completely. The storm swallowed the building whole, erasing tracks as if they'd never been there. Lucas turned the key. The engine caught. He looked in the rearview mirror and met Rex's eyes. "You led us here," he said. "Now you lead us out." Rex's ears pricked forward. The truck rolled into the snow, carrying a letter, a truth, and a plan that had been waiting years to be used. And somewhere behind them, the hunt realized it had just lost its advantage. The law office sat on the edge of town, a brick building that had survived floods, fires, and the slow death of river commerce. The sign read, "Brooks and Holloway Estate Planning, Family Law, Asset Protection." The paint was faded, but the lettering still sharp. To Lucas, it looked like the kind of place where things didn't disappear easily. He parked across the street and cut the engine. Snow tapped softly against the windshield. Stay close, he told the kids. Eyes up. Rex was already out of the truck, scanning the sidewalk, nose working the air. Only when he settled did Lucas open the back door for Ethan and Ellie. Inside, the office smelled like old paper, coffee, and cedar polish. A receptionist glanced up, started to ask a question, then stopped when she saw Lucas's face. "Mr. Reed?" she said quietly. "He's been waiting for you." Daniel Brooks stood as soon as Lucas entered the conference room. Late 60s, wire-rimmed glasses, calm eyes that had seen storms before. He didn't reach for Lucas's hand right away. He looked at the kids first, then at Rex. "Sarah trained him well," Daniel said. Lucas set the lockbox on the table. The sound of steel meeting wood echoed louder than it shoulda. "She knew you'd come," Daniel continued. "I hoped it wouldn't be like this." Lucas didn't sit. "Tell me what she hid." Daniel opened a folder thick enough to bend. He slid one document forward, then another. Trust registrations, offshore holdings, shipping manifests tied to a private maritime fund that dated back 3 generations. "Sarah's grandmother," Daniel said, "wasn't part of the Cole fortune. Different bloodline, different money. Quiet money." "How quiet?" Lucas asked. Daniel met his eyes. $200 million. The room went silent. Ellie's hand tightened in Lucas's sleeve. Ethan stopped breathing for a second. Lucas shook his head slowly. "That's not possible. We lived paycheck to paycheck." "By design," Daniel replied. "Sarah refused to access it. She wanted your life to be real, untouched by leverage, until leverage became necessary." Lucas ran a hand down his face. He thought of second-hand coats, of skipped repairs, of Sarah smiling anyway. "She never spent a dime," Daniel said. "But she built safeguards, ironclad, asset protection, custody contingencies, federal oversight." Daniel turned a page and slid it forward. Activation clause. Executed upon coercive custody attempt. Lucas read it once, then again. If a surviving parent is subjected to displacement, intimidation, or legal manipulation designed to remove minor children from their guardian, all trust protections engage immediately. Lucas exhaled through his nose. She knew. "Yes," Daniel said softly. "She knew her mother." Rex shifted closer to Lucas's chair, pressing his weight against his leg. Lucas rested a hand on his head without looking down. "What happens now?" Lucas asked. Daniel leaned back. "Time 200 mems. Now you stop being invisible. The trust is live. Federal filings went out this morning. Margaret Cole's attorneys are already behind the curve." "And the kids?" Lucas asked. "Protected," Daniel said. "Fully. Any attempt to remove them now becomes a legal liability." Lucas closed his eyes. Relief hit him hard enough to hurt. Ellie whispered, "Does this mean Grandma can't take us?" Lucas opened his eyes. "That's exactly what it means." Daniel gathered the papers neatly. "There's something else," he said. "Surveillance. The SUV you saw? Private investigators. Hired quietly. Not illegal, but documented. Lucas's jaw tightened. They cut power. They watched us. I know, Daniel said, and now I can prove intent. Lucas stood. He felt different. Not lighter. Sharper. I don't want a mansion, Lucas said. I don't want revenge. Daniel nodded. Sarah expected that. The trust doesn't require you to spend, only to protect. Lucas looked down at Rex. He protected us first. Daniel smiled faintly. Sometimes the most valuable asset in the room isn't on paper. Outside, an engine idled too long at the curb. Rex's ears snapped forward. Daniel glanced at the window. They're learning, he said, but they're late. Lucas squared his shoulders. $200 million wasn't what changed. Everything. The truth did. And now the hunt had shifted. Because prey doesn't stay prey once it knows the terrain. Lucas didn't drive straight back to the warehouse. He took the long way. 2 extra turns, 1 dead-end loop near the grain silos, a slow pass by the river road. Old habits from a past life surfaced without permission. Check reflections. Check timing. Check who's behind you. Rex stayed standing in the back seat the entire drive, eyes locked on the side mirrors. He didn't bark. He didn't whine. He watched. Someone's following us, isn't there? Ethan asked quietly. Lucas didn't lie. Maybe. Ellie reached for her brother's hand. Rex shifted his weight closer to them, a living wall of muscle and calm. When Lucas finally turned toward the warehouse access road, the SUV was gone. But the feeling didn't leave. It clung to him like cold smoke. They arrived to silence, too clean, too empty. Lucas killed the engine but didn't move right away. He scanned the surroundings, the dock, the rusted fencing, the tree line across the river. Snow covered most tracks, but not all. Rex was out of the truck before Lucas could stop him. He lowered his nose to the ground, moving fast now, circling the building. His tail stiffened. Stay close, Lucas told the kids as he followed. The back door of the warehouse was ajar. Lucas felt the shift instantly. This wasn't coincidence. This wasn't weather. He motioned the kids behind a stack of pallets and stepped forward slowly. Inside, heater was off. The air was colder than it should have been. Lucas crossed the room, heart pounding, and checked the breaker panel near the wall. The main switch had been flipped. On purpose. Rex growled low, deep in his chest, then moved toward the far wall where the floor had collapsed earlier. He stopped abruptly and sniffed hard. Footprints. Not Lucas's. Not the kids'. Heavy boots. Fresh. Lucas crouched and ran a hand over the marks. Someone had been here. Recently. Long enough to look. Long enough to understand what they'd almost found. They know, Lucas muttered. Ellie's voice trembled. Know what? Lucas straightened. That we're not helpless. Before he could say more, headlights flashed through the cracked window. A vehicle slowed outside. Then another. Lucas swore under his breath. Rex moved instantly, placing himself between the kids and the door. Posture perfect. Controlled, disciplined, trained. He wasn't attacking. He was warning. A knock echoed through the warehouse. "Mr. Reed?" a voice called. "County Sheriff's Office." Lucas closed his eyes for half a second. So this was the next move. He stepped forward, opening the door just enough to see Sheriff Halverson standing in the snow, hat pulled low, cruiser idling behind him. The man looked uncomfortable. That told Lucas everything. "Afternoon," the sheriff said. "We got a call. Welfare check." Lucas folded his arms. "From my mother-in-law." Halverson didn't deny it. "She's concerned." Lucas laughed quietly. "Of course she is." The sheriff glanced past him and froze slightly when Rex stepped into view, eyes locked, stance unyielding. "That dog trained?" Halverson asked. "Yes," Lucas said, "and calm, as long as no one crosses a line." Halverson swallowed. "Mind if I speak to the kids?" Lucas didn't move. "I do mind." A long pause stretched between them. Wind cut through the space. Then another voice cut in from behind the cruisers. "Sheriff, you might want to reconsider." Daniel Brooks stepped out of a second vehicle, holding a folder thick enough to end arguments. Snow dusted his coat, but his expression was steady. Halverson's shoulders dropped a fraction. "Mr. Brooks." "Federal filings went through this morning," Daniel said calmly. "Any attempt to remove or interrogate the children without counsel present would be unlawful." The sheriff exhaled slowly. "That's so." Daniel handed him the top page. Halverson scanned it, jaw tightening. "Looks like I've been put in the middle," the sheriff muttered. "You were put there on purpose," Lucas said. Halverson handed the paper back. "I'm not here to fight," he said quietly. "But I'll tell you this. People with money don't like losing control. Be careful." Lucas nodded once. "We are." The sheriff turned back toward his cruiser. As he did, Rex let out a single bark, times 600 melms. Short, sharp, final. The cruisers pulled away, taillights disappearing into the snow. Silence returned, heavier than before. Ellie stepped forward and hugged Lucas around the waist. "They almost took us." Lucas knelt, pulling both kids close. "Not today." Rex pressed in, completing the circle. Lucas looked toward the dark tree line beyond the warehouse. He knew now. This wasn't about paperwork anymore. This was a hunt. And the hunters had just realized their prey could bite back. The warehouse felt smaller after the cruisers left. Not physically, but emotionally. Like the walls had leaned in just enough to remind Lucas that safety was temporary, conditional, and always one signature away from being revoked. Snow continued to fall outside, quieter now, as if the storm itself had stepped back to watch. Lucas locked the door. Twice. He turned and found Ethan and Ellie sitting on the floor beside Rex, their backs against the pallet wall. Neither child spoke. They didn't need to. The fear was there, raw and unhidden, sitting in their eyes like a question no kid should have to ask. "Are they coming back?" Ellie finally whispered. Lucas knelt in front of them. He kept his voice low, even. "Not tonight." "But they could," Ethan said. "Yes," Lucas admitted. "They could." That honesty mattered. He'd learned that overseas, false comfort breaks faster than truth. Rex stood suddenly, moving away from the kids and positioning himself squarely in front of the door. His body wasn't tense in panic. It was disciplined, controlled. A K9 holding a line. Lucas felt it then. The familiar tightening in his chest. The old instinct. The one he'd spent years trying to bury under civilian routines and school drop-offs and quiet dinners. This wasn't a legal dispute anymore. This was pressure designed to break him. His phone buzzed again. This time it wasn't Margaret. It was an unknown number. Lucas stepped away and answered. "Lucas Reed." A man's voice came through, calm, professional, almost friendly. "Mr. Reed, this is Frank Lowell. I represent the Cole family in matters of family law and asset protection." Lucas closed his eyes briefly. "What do you want?" "To resolve this without further distress," Lowell said. "Your current environment is unsuitable. We can arrange temporary guardianship while things stabilize." Lucas laughed softly. "You already tried that." Lowell paused. "You're a decorated veteran," he said carefully. "But trauma complicates custody. Courts take mental health very seriously." There it was. Weaponized concern. Legal framing. High-dollar family law tactics Lucas had only just begun to understand. "You don't know me," Lucas said quietly. "I know enough," Lowell replied. "And I know that prolonged resistance will only increase legal costs, stress, and risk for the children." Lucas glanced over at Rex, still guarding the door. "My wife prepared for this," Lucas said. "You're late." Another pause. Longer this time. "Be reasonable," Lowell said at last. "Money doesn't need to be part of this." Lucas smiled, cold and sharp. "Money already is." He ended the call. For a moment the warehouse was silent except for the wind and the heater's uneven hum. Then Rex growled, low, vibrating, a warning that bypassed logic and went straight to instinct. Lucas turned toward the back wall. Footsteps. Slow, measured. Not at the door. At the side. Entrance. Lucas felt his pulse spike, but his hands stayed steady. He grabbed the flashlight and moved in front of the kids without a word. Rex mirrored him instantly, shoulder aligned with Lucas's leg. The side door handle rattled once, then stopped. A voice came through the metal. "Lucas Reed, this is Sheriff Halverson again." Lucas didn't move. "You already did your check." "I know," the sheriff said. "This isn't official, and I shouldn't be here." Lucas's jaw tightened. "Then why are you?" A breath on the other side. "Because I don't like how this is going." Lucas cracked the door just enough to see the sheriff's face. Halverson looked pale, tense. He glanced over his shoulder toward the dark road. "They're pushing for emergency removal," Halverson said quietly. "Tonight. Different judge. Out of county." Lucas felt the bottom drop out of his stomach. "You said they didn't have cause." "They don't," Halverson said. "But they have money and influence. And paperwork moves fast when people want it to." Lucas swallowed. "When?" Halverson hesitated. "Soon." Rex stepped forward, growl deepening. Halverson noticed and wisely took a step back. "I'm not here to take your kids," the sheriff said. "I'm here to tell you to leave. Now. Get somewhere public. Somewhere with cameras. Witnesses." Lucas stared at him. "Why are you helping me?" Halverson met his eyes. "Because I've seen this before, and it doesn't end well if you stay put." Lucas nodded once. "Thank you." The sheriff stepped back into the snow. "Good luck," he said. "You're standing on the edge of something ugly." The door closed. Lucas turned to his children. "Get your coats," he said calmly. "We're moving." Ellie's voice shook. "Where?" "Anywhere they can't pretend we disappeared," Lucas replied. Rex barked once. Short, sharp, decisive. Lucas grabbed the lockbox, the documents, the USB. He didn't look back at the hole in the floor, or the pallets, or the temporary shelter that had already outlived its purpose. Because this moment, was the threshold. Behind them was fear. Ahead was a fight that would decide everything. And Lucas Reed understood, with absolute clarity, that once he crossed this line, there would be no going back. They crossed county lines before sunrise. Lucas drove with both hands locked on the wheel, knuckles pale, eyes steady. The road was empty, slick with ice, lit only by the sweep of headlights and the occasional glow of a closed gas station sign. Rex stood braced in the back seat between Ethan and Ellie, his body absorbing every jolt, his gaze flicking to the mirrors like a sentry counting threats. By the time the courthouse came into view, the sky was a thin gray sheet stretched tight over the valley. Daniel Brooks was already there. He waited on the steps with a travel mug in one hand and a leather briefcase in the other, posture relaxed in the way only men who prepare for worst-case scenarios can be. When Lucas pulled in, Daniel didn't waste time with greetings. "Good," he said. "You listened." Lucas shut the engine off. "They were moving tonight." Daniel nodded. "I know. That's why we are." Inside, the courthouse smelled of disinfectant and old wood. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead. The twins sat on a bench beside Rex, whispering to each other, shoulders hunched inside their coats. Rex lay down, but didn't rest. His head stayed up, eyes tracking movement. Daniel led Lucas into a small hearing room. No spectators, no cameras, just a judge, a clerk, and a stack of papers thick enough to change a life. Judge Harrow was already seated when they entered. She looked up, adjusted her glasses, and scanned the room with a practiced eye. "Mr. Reed," she said, "I understand there's an emergency petition pending." "Yes, Your Honor," Daniel replied smoothly. and an emergency injunction to stop it. Across the room, Margaret Cole's attorney rose. Frank Lowell looked immaculate, tailored suit, calm smile, confidence purchased with decades of high-dollar family law victories. "Your Honor," Lowell began, "this is about child welfare. My client has serious concerns regarding Mr. Reed's stability and living conditions." Daniel didn't flinch. "We anticipated that." He placed the USB on the table, along with the letter and the trust documents. "This case isn't about instability," Daniel said. "It's about coercion." Judge Harrow lifted a brow. "Explain." Daniel clicked a button. The room filled with audio. Sarah's voice, clear and steady despite the faint tremor beneath it. "If something happens to me, my mother will try to take control. She will use courts, money, and fear. Do not let her rewrite our family." Lucas closed his eyes. Hearing Sarah again hurt, but it also anchored him. Lowell shifted. "Your Honor, recordings made without—" "Sit down, Mr. Lowell," Judge Harrow said calmly. "I'll decide admissibility." Daniel continued. He laid out timelines. Displacement from the home. Surveillance. A welfare check initiated within hours. Attempts to frame Lucas as unfit. Each point backed by documentation. Texts, timestamps, affidavits. The language was precise, clean, the kind used in estate planning and high-level custody cases where details mattered more than emotion. Judge Harrow leaned back. "And the trust?" Daniel slid the activation clause forward. "Triggered by coercive custody interference. Filed federally at 8:14 this morning." Lowell stood again, jaw tight. "Jaw. This is excessive. My client acted out of concern." "Concern doesn't cut power lines," Daniel replied evenly. "Nor does it hire investigators to tail a widower and his children." The judge's gaze hardened. "Is that true, Mr. Lowell?" Lowell hesitated. "Just long enough." Judge Harrow exhaled. "I've seen enough." She looked at Lucas directly. "Mr. Reed, I'm issuing an immediate stay on all custody actions initiated by the Cole family. Full parental authority remains with you. Any further attempts to remove your children without court approval will be considered harassment." Ellie gasped softly. Ethan's shoulders dropped, tension releasing in a way only children know how to release it. "And one more thing," the judge added. "Given the evidence presented, I'm referring this matter for review regarding abuse of process." Lowell sat down slowly, color draining from his face. Outside the hearing room, Margaret Cole waited. She didn't shout. She didn't plead. She simply stared at Lucas with something sharp and wounded flickering behind her eyes. "This isn't over," she said quietly. Lucas met her gaze. "For my kids, it is." She turned away without another word. In the hallway, Rex rose and pressed his head into Lucas's thigh, grounding him as the adrenaline finally ebbed. Daniel clasped Lucas's shoulder. "You held the line," Daniel said. "That matters." Lucas nodded. He looked at his children, tired, shaken, safe. The legal fight had turned, not because of money, not because of influence, because Sarah had planned, because the truth had been documented, because a dog had trusted his instincts when people didn't. As they stepped back into the cold daylight, Lucas understood something new. This wasn't the end of the battle, but it was the moment the balance shifted. Margaret Cole didn't leave the courthouse right away. She stood beneath the stone archway as reporters drifted past without recognizing her, their attention already pulled toward louder stories, easier villains. The winter light cut across her face, sharp enough to show the cracks she'd spent a lifetime hiding. For the first time since Lucas had known her, she looked small. Lucas kept his distance. He stood with Ethan and Ellie near the steps, Rex seated at his side, calm but watchful. The adrenaline had burned off, leaving a heavy quiet behind, one that settled deep in the chest. Court victories didn't sound like fireworks. They sounded like doors closing softly, finally, after too much noise. Margaret approached him alone. "I never thought it would come to this," she said, voice low. Not pleading, not angry, tired. Lucas didn't answer. She glanced at the children, then away, as if looking at them cost too much. "You don't understand the pressure," she continued. "The family, the board, the expectations. Money isn't just money when people depend on it." Lucas met her eyes. Sarah understood pressure. She lived with it every day. Margaret's jaw tightened. Sarah made mistakes. Lucas shook his head once. No, she made plans. Rex shifted, placing himself half a step closer to Lucas. Not threatening, present. Margaret noticed. She always noticed power. Who held it? Where it stood. Her gaze lingered on the dog longer than necessary. "That animal," she said, carefully, choosing the word, "has caused more trouble than you realize." Lucas's voice stayed level. "He's caused truth." For a moment, something flickered across Margaret's face. Fear, maybe. Or the realization that control only works when people believe in it. She straightened her coat, restoring the posture she'd perfected over decades. "You could still choose differently," she said. "A settlement, a quiet arrangement. The children would have access to resources, elite schools, private health care." Lucas cut her off. "They already have what they need." She scoffed softly. "Love doesn't pay tuition." "No," Lucas replied, "but integrity pays for everything else." Margaret stared at him as if trying to memorize the man she'd misjudged. Then she nodded once, sharp, decisive, and turned away. Her heels clicked against the stone, each step echoing until it didn't. Control didn't shatter loudly. It broke in silence. The drive back was slower, deliberate. Lucas took surface roads instead of highways, stopping once for gas and hot coffee from a place that smelled like burnt toast and second chances. The kids sat at a small table by the window, steam fogging the glass as they laughed. Quietly at first, then louder. Ellie leaned into Lucas when he sat beside her. "Are we really okay?" Lucas considered the question. "We're safer," he said, "and we're not alone." Rex lay at their feet, chin on his paws, eyes half closed but aware. A working dog never truly slept, not when the world still needed watching. Back outside, snow fell gently, unbothered by court rulings or family wars. Lucas loaded the truck and glanced once more at the courthouse, solid, indifferent, unmoved by the lives it redirected. On the road, his phone buzzed again. This time, it was Daniel Brooks. "It's done," Daniel said. "For now. You'll get notices, of course. But the injunction holds. Federal oversight. Asset protection in place. If you want to discuss long-term planning, trust management, financial planning, charitable structures, we can." Lucas smiled faintly. "I know a few people who could use help." Daniel chuckled. "Sarah would like that." When the call ended, Lucas drove on, the sun dipping low over the Montana hills. The kids dozed, heads resting against Rex's warm sides. The truck hummed steadily, a sound that felt like progress. Lucas thought of the warehouse, of the hole in the floor, of the lockbox and the letter, and the quiet courage it took to plan for a future you might not see. Margaret had tried to control the ending. Sarah had written a different one. And somewhere between the two stood a man who had hit bottom and refused to let it define him, and a dog who never let go of the truth. As the road stretched ahead, Lucas knew one thing with absolute certainty. They weren't running anymore. They were choosing how to live. They didn't go back to the warehouse. Lucas made that decision without saying it out loud. The same way some choices arrive fully formed and refuse to be argued with. He turned the truck south, away from the river docks and rusted steel, toward a stretch of land outside town that opened wide under the winter sky. The property had belonged to an old contractor Lucas once helped during a brutal flood season years ago. Nothing fancy, just acreage, a weather-beaten barn, and a small house that leaned a little but still stood. The kind of place built to last, not to impress. "This is home?" Ellie asked softly as Lucas shut off the engine. "For now," Lucas said. Then, after a beat, "And maybe for a long while." Rex jumped down first, circling the land with quiet authority. He sniffed the air, the ground, the wind itself, then returned to Lucas and sat. No warning signs, no tension, just acceptance. Lucas took that as permission. Over the next weeks, life changed shape. Not overnight, not magically, but deliberately. Lucas worked mornings repairing the house and evenings on the phone with Daniel Brooks, learning words he'd never expected to care about. Financial planning, estate planning, asset protection. Not to build wealth for its own sake, but to keep it from becoming a weapon again. He turned down the Cole family's settlement offer without reading past the first page. Instead, he set up something new. It started small, a local account, then paperwork, then a name. The Sarah and Rex Foundation. Daniel raised an eyebrow when Lucas mentioned it. Veteran support and K-9 rehabilitation? And families, Lucas said, the ones who fall through the cracks. The foundation wasn't flashy. No marble lobby, no donor wall. Just purpose, structure, dignity. a second chance that didn't ask for gratitude. Rex became the quiet symbol of it all. Kids from town would stop by the fence just to watch him train. Veterans would kneel beside him, resting hands on his broad shoulders, finding steadiness in his presence. Rex never performed. He simply existed. Calm, grounded, a reminder that loyalty didn't need an audience. At home, things softened. Ellie laughed again, full, unguarded laughter that filled the rooms and startled Lucas every time. Ethan helped repair fences and asked questions about engines and life in equal measure. Nights ended around a kitchen table instead of a courthouse bench. One evening, as snow fell gently outside, Lucas sat with Rex on the porch, coffee cooling in his hands. The dog leaned against him, solid and familiar. "You know," Lucas said quietly, "people think money fixes things." Rex huffed softly. "It doesn't," Lucas continued. "Choice does." He thought about Margaret Cole then, not with anger, but with clarity. Control had been her language. It had cost her everything that mattered. Lucas chose differently. He chose work over wealth, presence over power, community over isolation. He chose to build something that couldn't be taken away by paperwork or influence. And most of all, he chose to raise his children in a place where love didn't come with conditions. As winter deepened, the foundation opened its doors. Modest, functional, alive with quiet purpose. No speeches, no cameras, just people showing up for one another. Lucas stood back one afternoon, watching Ethan help a veteran sand a doorframe, Ellie walking Rex along the fence line, both of them smiling. This was the life Sarah had prepared him for. Not comfort, meaning. The first real dinner they shared at the house didn't look like a celebration. No linen tablecloth, no matching plates. Just a pot of chili simmering on the stove, cornbread cooling on the counter, and 3 mismatched chairs pulled close enough that knees bumped when they sat. Outside, the wind eased for once, snow drifting down in slow, patient flakes that softened the edges of the land. Ellie was the first to laugh. It came out small and surprised, like she hadn't expected the sound to belong to her anymore. She covered her mouth, then laughed again, louder this time, when Rex nudged her elbow, hoping for a drop of cornbread. Ethan rolled his eyes, but the tension left his shoulders, and soon he was laughing too. Lucas watched them from the stove, spoon in hand, chest tight in a way that didn't hurt. This was the sound he'd been missing. They ate slowly, talked about nothing important. School, a neighbor's dog that barked at shadows, whether the old barn could be turned into something useful come spring. Lucas didn't rush them. He let the night take its time. After dinner, Ellie cleared the table without being asked. Ethan wiped down the counter like he was practicing for something bigger than chores. Rex lay in the doorway, half asleep, one ear cocked toward the room, as if listening for trouble that never came. Lucas stepped outside onto the porch, mug warming his hands. The land stretched out before him, quiet and honest. No gates, no guards, no iron closing behind them. just open space and the promise of work. Rex followed, settling at Lucas's feet. "You did good," Lucas said softly, not looking down. "You know that?" Rex's tail thumped once against the wood. Lucas thought about the money again. Not as a number, but as a tool that could easily become a trap. He'd seen it before. Wealth without direction hollowed people out. It turned fear into policy and love into leverage. Inside, Ellie's laughter floated through the open window again. That sound grounded him more than any account balance ever could. When Lucas returned inside, Ellie looked up from her drawing. "Dad?" "Yeah, kiddo. Do you think Mom would like it here?" Lucas didn't answer right away. He crossed the room and looked at the sketch. A simple drawing of the house, the barn, 3 stick figures, and a dog drawn larger than life. "I think," Lucas said carefully, "she'd like that you feel safe enough to draw again." Ellie nodded, satisfied. Later, after the kids were asleep, Lucas sat at the table with a folder Daniel had dropped off earlier. Long-term financial planning, projected costs, charitable structures, insurance options, important things, necessary things. But not tonight. He closed the folder and slid it aside. Rex lifted his head and walked over, placing it gently on Lucas's knee. The weight was familiar, grounding, a reminder of nights when the world pressed too close and Rex had anchored him back to the present. "You didn't save us," Lucas murmured. "You reminded us who we were." Rex exhaled, slow and content. Lucas leaned back in his chair and listened to the house. New sounds now. The soft creak of wood warming, the quiet rhythm of breathing down the hall. Peace wasn't loud. It didn't announce itself. It arrived when fear finally ran out of places to hide. Money could buy safety. It could buy time. But it couldn't buy this. It couldn't buy the way Ellie slept with the door cracked open again, or the way Ethan had started asking